It um, it doesn't look like it is streaming. Oh, you are live. Okay, good. Okay, so sorry about the technology for those here, but it looks like it's working on the yes, it is. Good. So our class tonight is about kosher laws for Passover. I thank you all for coming. And what we'll use as a source is what's called the Pesach Guide. Every year, the Rabbinical Assembly publishes this guide to foods that processed and otherwise that are now kosher for Passover. What needs a kosher certification and what doesn't need a kosher certification for Passover. So just for the sake of archiving for the internet and whatnot, if anybody, Joe Schmo out in Jenemsveld is looking for kosher laws for Passover and they come upon this video, that just a little bit of a background, that the whole basis for kosher laws for Passover is the sentence that we're going to read from the Torah this Shabbat, which is always the Shabbat closest to the new month of Nisan, because Passover is in the Jewish month of Nisan. So the first Shabbat after the first of Nisan is known as Shabbat HaChodesh, the Shabbat of the month, where we read a selection. It is the Cohen's son's bar mitzvah anniversary. So I remember he had HaChodesh, and he learned as a Hebrew school student. We were all very proud that he learned that very long maftir reading from the Torah, 20 sentences long, and it was as if it was only 2 sentences. That's how well Brett did. So a shout out to Brett Cohen and his bar mitzvah anniversary this coming Shabbat. So those 20 sentences from chapter 12 of Exodus talk about the preparations for Passover in Egypt. And one of the aspects is not just to have to get your lamb ready for the sacrifice. In Egypt, the sheep was slaughtered, blood on the doorposts, so that God would pass over their houses and protect the firstborn in their houses. And so while the temple was standing, so this is until 2,000 years ago, a hallmark of observing Passover was bringing a lamb for sacrifice in the temple. Everybody in the community could bring a lamb. That's why everybody had to be in a state of ritual purity to bring the lamb for slaughter, and then everybody would partake of that. That would be their Seder. That would be their Passover meal. That first night is eating that lamb. Another aspect of it, of course, is eating matzah. And the third aspect, which affects our topic tonight, is the commandment not to have any leavened products in our possession during the 7 days of the holiday of Matzah. That's what Passover is called in the Torah, Chag HaMatzot, the festival of matzah. So we eat matzah for 7 days, so that's not such a hardship. The hardship is not being allowed to eat leavened products, anything made with yeast, what is commonly known as Comets or Comets. Anything that is made from flour and water and has yeast added to it, and even if it doesn't have yeast added to it, if there's flour and water in it, it can ferment, and therefore any baked products that has anything with grain that can become chametz cannot be eaten on Passover, except for matzah. So that's the oxymoron of Passover. You can't have leavened products. Matzah is not leavened, but the rabbis expanded on these laws. So about matzah, 5 grains, according to the rabbis, comprise those grains which we cannot eat on Passover and from which we can make matzah: wheat, barley, oat, rye, and spelt. Those 5 grains are grains from which we make matzah, and from which anything else we make from it is considered chametz. Okay? The rabbis came up with the formula on how to make matzah for 18 minutes from the moment that flour mixes with the water until it comes out of the oven as matzah. That's the time limit. Anything more than 18 minutes, if it takes you 18 minutes and 1 second to make matzah, that becomes chametz. You have until 18 minutes. Flour and water together, mix it up, flatten it out, put the holes in it, put it in the oven, let it bake. It has to be, we can't bake it in our oven, a home oven. It has to be in a commercial oven, it has to be higher temperature than what we can achieve at home. And 18 minutes, and that's it. Timer goes off, and then you have matzah. That's how it's made. Anything else in it, other than flour and water, becomes enriched matzah, like egg matzah. So the commandment on Passover to eat matzah is the flour and water matzah. You cannot fulfill your commandment to eat matzah by eating egg matzah. So any matzah that's made with wheat, rye, oat, barley, or spelt, you can get oat matzah. I believe you can get spelt matzah. And of course, you can get wheat matzah. I haven't seen barley matzah. And I haven't seen rye matzah. That would be kind of cool. Put pastrami on it. But I haven't seen rye or barley matzah. And anyway, you can get the others. The others are more expensive because they're less common. And then, of course, there's the different kinds of matzah. The machine-made matzah, which you buy in the 5-pound boxes. Or shmura matzah, which is handmade. Which also means, shmura means watched. So, there's these extra categories of kashrut about everything. There's kosher and there's glot kosher. There's kosher dairy, and then there's chalav Yisrael, which means Jewish dairy. And then there's baked products, and then there's pot Yisrael, which is Jewish baked products. So it's an extra layer of supervision and production that means that a Jew has supervised the making of the matzah, not just the making of the matzah, but even the cutting of the wheat in the field. From that moment until the matzah is made, it has been watched, shmura, watched. And so there are some who are very diligent about that, because God forbid a drop of water gets on the wheat from when it's chopped down in the field until it's made into flour, until it's put in the bag, until it gets to the bakery. Any drop of water gets in there, the timer has started. So you want to be sure about the shmura matzah. And then, of course, you're paying a lot more money for the. So there's machine-made shmura matzah. So we'll compromise in my house. So we'll have shmura matzah for the seders. Machine-made shmura matzah. Those who want to buy the handmade matzah, go right ahead. I think the more hands involved in it and less oven, the more it tastes like cardboard. But that's just my personal opinion. But it's also much more expensive. So anyway, it depends on how much kosher matzah. So don't worry about it. You buy whatever Giant or Shoppers has. It's totally fine. It says kosher for Passover on it. Has the OU on it. Totally fine for Passover. But some people just want to do a little bit extra. So then they go with the shmura matzah. So that's matzah. The issue is, of course, the leavened products of what becomes Comets, and therefore how that affects Kashrut. So let me focus on this now for the rest of the time. So the verse says you're not allowed to have Comets in your possession for the 7 days of Passover. So element number one here is getting rid of Comets from your possession. Just want to see, okay. By the way, if you're watching online, you could, and if you have questions as they come up, you can email me or you can put them in the chat box next to your screen that you're watching, and I'll be able to see the questions that way. Not having it in your possession. So according to that would mean just a straightforward literal meaning you cannot have it in your house at all for the 7 days of Passover, which means you have to budget properly. Unless you want to waste food before Passover, you have until 10 o'clock of the day of the Seder to get rid of Comets in your house. Okay? So, if you don't budget your meals appropriately, anything literally as we interpret the verse, just a straightforward reading of the verse, if we need to get rid of all the Comets, then whatever is left in our house, opened or unopened, would have to be gotten rid of, because it says you cannot have it in your possession. The rabbis understood 2,000 years ago, 1,800 years ago, that this would be a hardship, that people would be losing a lot of money and a lot of food if they had to get rid of everything that was in their possession. So they came up with this legal fiction known as being able to sell your chametz, because the verse says it may not be in your possession. Well, if I don't own it, it's not in my possession. Doesn't matter, it's in my house. I don't own it, it's not in my possession. So the rabbi said, okay, sell your chametz to somebody who's not obligated to observe Passover. So there's a preschool teacher that we have here who is not Jewish, who is more than happy to serve as the agent that I use to buy everybody's chametz. And I'm putting it in air quotes because this teacher is not spending hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars to buy everybody's chametz. It's a token amount, $20, for which she understands she owns everybody's chametz. So that's why there are forms outside to sell your chametz. I am your agent to sell it. The preschool teacher buys it from me, and she has everybody's address on this form because she is theoretically allowed to knock on your door and say, I have a hankering for some bread. I need to take my bread from your house. So she could do that. And more Orthodox circles, people will provide a key to go with the sale of chametz form to make it real, so it doesn't look like it's really a legal fiction. They want to really make this into a real transaction. The form that I use, which is a contract, she understands that from 10 o'clock on Friday, April 22nd, until 8:37, or whenever Shabbos Yontif is over, Saturday night, April 30th, she is in possession of that, and that from that moment on, 8:37, she doesn't own it anymore. And then we have access to our chametz again, and it's in our possession again. So all of that allows us to keep food in our house, but we just keep it somewhere. All the dry goods you can keep in the pantry, locked up, covered, so you don't see it during Passover, and you wouldn't accidentally reach for it during Passover, right? And it allows us to keep things in the freezer that might have been open before, like leftovers that can keep for a while, or challah. If you bake your challah and you have extra challahs in your freezer, you can keep all that separate on a separate shelf in your freezer, locked away, cover it up, and you know that after Passover you can have access to it again. Now, this is in our homes. Businesses can do this as well. So, used to be in the day that Giant, our local supermarket chain, used to be owned by a Jew. Now Giant is owned by some Dutch company that also owns Stop and Shop. So it's all along the East Coast, these supermarkets have the same logo, owned by the Dutch company. But until that merger, a guy named Cohen owned a Giant. So rabbis in the area every year would ask Cohen to sell his chametz. Again, sell his chametz. He had no interest in doing that, which is a problem because you are not allowed, not you, we are all not allowed to eat chametz that hasn't been gotten rid of properly before Passover. So not only do we have to burn the chametz on Thursday night this year, like we do the search with the feather and the candle, and that kind of gives us a concrete way to say that we've just looked for the chametz, and then you burn it the next morning, which we do here. I take out the grill, people bring their chametz, and I also, the tradition is to keep your lulav from Sukkot and use that as kindling for burning the chametz. So we do that and take care of that. So if you don't sell your chametz before Passover, you can't eat your chametz because it's in a category known as chametz she'avar alav hapesach, which means chametz that lived through Passover. And if it lived through Passover without being dealt with properly, then it is forbidden for us to consume it after Passover. So for those people who go out for pizza after the holiday, you can't go to a Jewish-owned pizza parlor. Well, you could go to a kosher one, because then you know that they've sold their chametz. But a Jewish-owned pizza parlor, because the Jew is obligated to observe Passover, and if they haven't sold their chametz before Passover, then you can't eat the pizza in that shop right after Passover, because it's chametz that survived Passover. You couldn't have gone to Giant right after Passover to stock up on chametz, because that chametz that's on the shelf was there on Passover. So the bread that had been on the shelf, you have to wait a couple of days until they restock. When they restock, it's okay. So it's a problem for those who take this very seriously, what to do in a Jewish-owned shop in which the Jewish owner is not selling their chametz for Passover. So that's the complication with selling chametz or not selling chametz for Passover, and the impact that it has for us. The other aspect so any questions about that, about selling your chametz, or this concept of chametz she'avar alav hapesach, because I think that's enough. We all get this concept of selling your chametz. But any questions or comments about that?
What was Cohen supposed to have done if he had gone and sold it, and then other people come into the store and...
Right. So the question. So the Jewish owner of Giant, Cohen, what was he supposed to have done? There is a contract, which again is all a legal fiction, but it's enough of a legal fiction to permit people to then go into his store after Passover and buy the stuff.
What about during Passover?
So Jews aren't supposed to be buying chametz during Passover. It doesn't matter. They can do whatever they want. Well, he doesn't own it anymore, but that's the whole problem. That's why Cohen, I guess, was not an observant Jew. He didn't care about this. The whole thing sounded ridiculous to him. He didn't want anything to do with it. And the head of the Vod of Washington at the time, for years, every year would ask Cohen, or maybe he's based in Baltimore, so the head of the Vod in Baltimore, Star K, would ask him to sell his chametz, and he refused every year. So then the Vods would have to send out a notice. Mr. Cohen decided not to sell his chametz, so don't go into his store after Passover and buy your bread right away or anything else you're buying. You have to wait 3 days before going in, because that's the amount of time it would take to restock the bread on the shelves, that kind of thing. So it's not an issue anymore, because the Dutch company is not a Jewish company that owns Giant, and none of the supermarkets in the area is owned by a Jew. So it's like the mom and pop grocery stores, which don't exist anymore, which all used to be owned by Jews in Washington, or a lot of them used to be. So they would sell their chametz to, some of them would do that. So anyway, so that's the selling the chametz. The other issue about this is the more complicated one that gets to things that are certified kosher for Passover or not. So there's a concept of kashrut during the year that if you make a mistake with a drop of milk falls into your pot of chicken soup, that what do you do now? Does your chicken soup now is not kosher, and your whole pot that the chicken soup is made not kosher anymore? There's a concept of 1/60th. If the volume of the milk is less than 1/60th of the chicken soup in which it falls, then it's okay because you can't tell anymore that milk is in it. Okay, so you make a big pot of chicken soup, and you have your pot of coffee brewing right next to it. Okay, you take your half and half or your skim milk or whatever, and you're pouring it into your cup of coffee. Oops! You have a drop that goes into a drop of the coffee goes into your chicken soup. Oh no! Don't worry. Now, you can't do this on purpose because you like the taste of coffee in your chicken soup. You can't do that. But if it's a mistake and you realize that it's less than 1/60th, it's okay. Your chicken soup can still be eaten. It's still considered chicken soup, and your pot doesn't have to be koshered again. That 1/60th does not work for Comets. In other words, for a kosher for Passover. If it's found that a drop of Comets is in your kosher for Passover food, your food is not kosher for Passover. The pot in which that food has been made is not kosher for Passover anymore. The plate on which that food is put on to be served and the utensils that were cutting it all are not kosher for Passover anymore because there was a drop of Comets on it. Okay, so that is what makes all of the kosher laws for Passover that much more stringent than regular kashrut during the year. Does everybody get that concept? Not a microscopic drop of chametz is allowed to be in any food during Passover. For food to be considered kosher for Passover, there is not even a microscopic trace of chametz in it. So the issue then becomes how to certify processed foods kosher for Passover, and what the cleaning that has to go through, that the factories have to go through in order to be certified kosher for Passover, the cleaning that we have to do in our houses in order to make our kitchens kosher for Passover. It's all because not a drop of chametz is allowed with our food for Passover. So we all know this, what countertops, how we have to clean everything in the kitchen that comes into contact with food. So the refrigerators have to be cleaned out. Ovens have to be cleaned and put on the self-cleaning cycle for the regular cycle in order to make your ovens kosher for Passover. Stovetops, easier to deal with with electric or with gas stovetop because you just clean that and let the fire burn. You clean the top, you clean the grill, and you let the fire at the highest temperature on it for 15 minutes. You got your stovetop done. But if it's electric or if it's a glass top, then see me afterwards about how to clean that. Or go online, koshering glass, whatever it's called, because I don't have it, but it's, you know what I'm talking about. Ovens that have just a piece of glass on it, and somehow there's this convection element in it that heats things. I don't know. There is a way to kosher that for Passover, but and you have to clean it in a certain way, or else you're ruining the heating element that's in the glass. Just go online. The CRC, the Chicago Rabbinic Council, which you'll see their kashrut symbols. If you go to Harris Teeter, for example, their milk is kosher with the CRC logo on it. It's a triangle that has CRC inside of it. So the Chicago Rabbinic Council has an extensive guide on koshering things for Passover. This has a little bit. I don't think it says in here how to do that particular glass top. Anyway, so just look online how to do that. If it's from the CRC or from the OU, then you can trust it to do it. If you have granite or some similar stone countertops, easy to clean, and you don't have to put a special cover on top of it because it's already non-porous. Okay, so that's all the cleaning. The foods, it's what foods now can be considered. Do you have a question, Audrey? No. So what foods now can be considered kosher for Passover? So obviously all the foods that are certified kosher for Passover are more expensive than during the year. Do they need to be more expensive than during the year? That's the politics there behind and the economics of it. Some of these companies are only in business for just the 1 week holiday, so you can understand why they need to make some money. But there's a limit to how much money to make. So anyway, my wife and I, we go to 7 Mile Market in Baltimore. That's where we do our shopping. 2 or 3 shopping carts full of stuff. That's our big expedition that we're going next week. So their prices we have found just easier, and it's a little bit cheaper than some of the stores around here. But that's not necessarily a plug for 7 Mile Market, but it's just that's our pattern. So not everything you buy for Passover needs to have a kosher for Passover symbol on it. Because again, the kosher for Passover symbol means that there's not a trace of Comets in that food, and you can be guaranteed that there's not a trace of it. There are other foods that we buy that are certified kosher that don't have a trace of Comets ever in it. But for Passover, some people put the P on it just to give a sense of comfort to some people. So what do I mean? Milk. There is no way that anything that it passes inspection by the Agriculture Department in the United States, all milk we buy in the supermarket is supervised and goes through a regular process. The cow has a machine put on its udder. And the milk goes into a machine, is pasteurized in another machine, and then put in a huge tanker truck and delivered to the dairy, the milk processing plant, whatever. There is no Comets that could ever get into any of those pipes or the hose that's attached to the udder of the cow. There's no way that Comets could get in there. And if there is a way, then that whole plant would have to be shut down because there's a problem with that plant. So milk, if you buy milk before Passover, then it doesn't have to have the kosher for Passover symbol on it. And milk now always lasts more than a week. So buy your milk that you need before Passover, and you can use it during Passover, and you don't have to spend the extra money. During Passover, then you need to buy it with a kosher for Passover symbol, just in case. Here's the difference. The reason is, just in case there could be a trace of Comets in this milk that hasn't been kosher for Passover, doesn't have the kosher Passover symbol in it, when we burn our Comets and we sell our Comets, we are selling whatever trace of Comets is in that milk that we have just purchased for Passover. So that if there by accident was something there, it's not our Comets, and we don't have to worry about it. We got rid of it. But during Passover, if it doesn't have the kosher Passover symbol on it, for the milk, you need to buy certified kosher for Passover on it. I see a couple people rolling their eyes about that explanation, but that's the explanation for it. Sharon.
So I have a question. I kind of like
Yes.
that explanation. So I would like to know why there aren't other products that I could buy and do the same thing.
There are, I'll tell you some of those products. Sharon's asking, so that explanation sounds reasonable according to Sharon. Are there other products that you can do that with? You can. There are other products you can do that with because there's not a trace, there's not a chance that Comets could get mixed in that process. So here we have. If you have the Pesach guide, this year's Pesach guide, page 8 lists these things that you can buy before Passover and not have to worry about it. Baking soda, bicarbonate of soda. It says, this is the middle of the page says no Pesach hechsher required. Doesn't need to have OUP or any other logo with a peanut. Products which may be purchased without a Passover hechsher before or during Passover. Even during Passover, you don't need to look for the hechsher. Baking soda, bicarbonate of soda, I have no idea what that is. Eggs, right? There's no chametz in eggs, right? If there is, that'd be kind of weird. What kind of egg is that? Fresh fruits and vegetables. Okay, you just go to the produce section of the supermarket. That's totally fresh fruits and vegetables. Fresh or frozen kosher meat. Okay, what?
This is the no place actually required. Now,
Right?
previously there was also a list, which I don't see here.
Yes.
Which does need a hechsher if you buy it during.
Right. So, Justice, I'll get there in 1 second, Adriana. I'm not going to repeat this question now for people who didn't hear, but let me just finish going through this list. Fresh or frozen kosher meat, but wherever you buy your kosher meat, well, that's not true. So, I mean, because you can buy kosher meat at Trader Joe's or Harris Teeter or Giant, right there, right, Empire, whatever. So the Empire products will have a P on it in time for Passover. But there could be some other kosher meat, non-glot meat, that Trader Joe's, I think, sells non-glot kosher meat. It has a triangle K on it, which is totally fine, by the way, triangle K kosher meat, as opposed to triangle K other products. Triangle K kosher meat is totally acceptable because the people behind the triangle K and that slaughterhouse that they work with in the Midwest is totally fine, totally acceptable. So they do non-glot. For those of you who don't care about kosher versus glot kosher, so non-glot is less expensive. So if you buy it before, because the people people who process meat are not allowed to eat lunch while they're doing that. Okay, that's just the rule in food production facilities. You can't be eating your own food while you're dealing with other food. It's just against the law. And if the inspector finds that you're doing that, the plant closes down, and it's an exorbitant fines. So the owner, the foreman, whatever, will make sure that their workers are not eating, and that during that time. So you can rest assured that when meat is being processed, that there's no comets being mixed in with it, right? And it's not like they're chopping up a cake with a knife after they're chopping up the meat with a knife. That's only all they're doing, right? So it's not just that food can get mixed in there, that the utensils could be used for something else. They're not doing anything else in that plant other than dealing with meat. Okay, so that's why fresh or kosher meat would be fine before Passover without a Passover hechsher on it. Nest tea, regular and decaffeinated tea, is always kosher for Passover, year round, even though it doesn't have the P on it. Pure black, green, or white tea leaves. So if you buy the leaves and steep them yourself, as opposed to buying bags, you could do that. Unflavored tea bags, right? So that's very important. Plain tea bags, not chamomile, not French vanilla tea, not anything like that. That's a flavoring, and that's chametz. The flavoring is usually a chametz. So that's why coffee, unflavored regular coffee. So if you like hazelnut coffee, no, it has to have a P on it, because the hazelnut flavoring would be chametz. But plain, regular coffee is fine for Passover without the kosher for Passover symbol on it. Extra virgin olive oil. Okay, so the processing of extra virgin ensures that there's never chametz mixed in. Whole or gutted fresh fish. Doesn't need to be kosher for Passover. Whole or half pecans. And whole unground spices and nuts. So ground spices, which are most of the spices that we buy, have to be kosher for Passover because the processing of the spices and the preparation of the spices could have chametz mixed in with that. But the whole spice, if you buy like whole cloves, something like that, that doesn't need, but ground cloves, salt and pepper, etc., need that, okay? No hechsher required purchase before Pesach. Oh, right under this, if bought during Pesach, they require a Pesach hechsher. You see that, Adriana, on page 8? So this is Adriana's question. What about that category of buying before Passover? If you buy before Passover, it doesn't need, but during Passover, it does need, then all pure fruit juices. Okay? Pure 100% fruit juice. So if it's Tropicana, let's say, not from concentrate, 100% fruit juice, you can buy it before Passover without the hechsher. But again, Tropicana and Simply Fresh, whatever other brand, I think they have kosher for Passover on it right now. So it's kind of hard not to buy it with the logo on it. But if it doesn't have it, you can buy it before Passover without it. But during Passover, it has to have it. Filleted fish, because the filleting process is a knife. You don't know where that knife has been during Passover. Okay? Frozen fruit, no additives. Again, in that plant, you don't know what else is being processed with the frozen fruit. Non-iodized salt, right? Most salt that we buy has iodine in it. I don't know why, but it just does. I guess it's a basic chemical that we need in our bodies, and it's an easy way to put it in with the salt. But that iodine is Comets, or how they make the iodine to put it in the salt is a Comets. So that's why the salt for Passover doesn't have iodine in it. Pure white sugar before Passover is okay, but during Passover has to say kosher for Passover. Quinoa. So there was a question years ago when quinoa was discovered as this grain alternative, right? It looks like couscous. Everybody knows what quinoa is now, but it grows in Peru mainly and Bolivia, up in the Andes, the only place where it grows in the world. I guess you could grow it in the Rockies, but it has to grow. It can only grow at 10,000 feet. So anywhere in the world, I guess that maybe it could grow in the Himalayas. I don't know. Some smart Jewish farmer would say, "Hey, we need some more quinoa in the world. Let's try it in the Himalayas." I don't know. Hasn't been done, but all the quinoa we get here comes from Peru and Bolivia. So Star K, OU, send the people down. Because the quinoa processing plant, it's hard to, there's not much quinoa around compared to how much wheat and barley there's around. So, the processing plants in Peru and Bolivia would do the wheat and barley together with the quinoa. So you need somebody there to assure that it's going to be kosher for Passover, that there's no wheat and barley mixed in with it. So you got the rabbis there assuring, so you can buy kosher for Passover quinoa. But if you buy it before Passover, you just have to make sure, you got to sift through it to make sure there's no wheat and barley mixed in. That's all. But during Passover, I have to say, because if you're buying it during Passover and you find wheat and barley mixed in with it, then you've just violated your whole and not having chametz on Passover because you just bought that. So it is your chametz. So you can't do that. Not during Passover. You didn't sell it yet. You haven't bought it yet. So if you're buying it during Passover, right? That's right. It's only past items that you're selling, not future items. Right? No, doesn't work that way. And so that's it. And some products sold by Equal Exchange Fair Trade Chocolate. So that's a whole other business about how chocolate is made and processed and who the workers are. So you get fair trade chocolate. So these are products. So if you want to save some money on what you're buying for Passover, you can stock up on milk stock up on milk, on juice, and frozen fruit and coffee. Right, so these things. So if you're doing a lot of frying, and you use olive oil in your frying, then it does make sense. It's cheaper.
Canned, like Dole pineapple, because that's all they process.
No, canned goods. You know, these are non-canned items. Canned goods always need a certification on it. It doesn't. No, the processing of canned products, even though it's 100% pineapple, the syrup that's in it could have Comets in it. It's not just pineapple juice. And even if you have
Pineapple, I thought in the past years that they.
no, there's no canned products on this list. There's no canned vegetables. There's no canned fruit on this list. The canning process could have Comets in it, and no, it has to say kosher for Passover on it. Yes.
How about packaged milk?
Oh, shelf milk. It says here white milk. Doesn't matter where the white milk, how it's done, as long as it's all white, not flavored milk, not chocolate milk. White milk. White milk doesn't matter if it comes and you buy it in the refrigerated section or on the shelf, so it could stay for 6 months. That kind of milk. As long as it's just white milk, then it's fine to buy that before Passover and use it during Passover. Yes.
What about decaf coffee?
Decaf coffee, no. The decaffeinating process is the same with tea. The decaffeinating process involves chametz. I don't know how, but there's chametz in the decaffeinating process. So yes, you can get decaf coffee and tea for Passover, but it has to have the P on it. The only brand, Nestea, decaffeinated. Decaffeinated Nestea. Now I don't know if that's. I don't think that's Nestea in a jar or in a bottle. I don't think it's talking about that Nestea. I think it's Nestea, the boxes of that. I'd have to check. But this says that the Nestea brand of regular and decaffeinated tea is totally fine without a Passover label on it. But I think it's the Nestea that you buy in the box of 100 tea bags, that kind of thing. I think that's what it's talking about, because you can buy Nestea already made iced tea. It's not that. So it's just the regular or decaf tea. Coffee, decaf coffee has to have the P on it.
So if you have the
Regular tea bags.
do you have to buy new? Or can you use
Oh, anything that is opened, even though theoretically it's kosher for Passover as a product. If it's opened before Passover, you cannot use it during Passover, because you never know. No matter how strict you are with it, some chametz could get into it, and it's just for being safe. You don't anything
So I
that's
take those open tea bags, I take them downstairs,
Right.
I sell them.
yes,
Then I burn the Comets saying that it's all gone, and I still don't use them.
right.
I mean, it's like fences over fences.
It's like fences over fences, but yes, that's the whole idea with keeping kosher, because the verse in the Torah says you may not have leavened products in your possession on Passover.
We can resolve that very quickly.
We cannot resolve that very quickly because we can't rewrite the Torah. So that is a clear-cut statement. It's just like not eating pork. It says clearly in the Torah you cannot eat a pig. There's no way around that.
You can't skip that
You
section.
can't skip the section. You can't read it in any different way. That's the way it is. So yes, that's just how we have to understand it. Any other questions about these products? Oh, there is one other thing that I wanted to get to. Yes. So I'm thinking, wait, only 45 minutes to go through this? There's a whole other page here, page 7 in the guide this year, which is new this year, at a category called Kitniot. Okay? Kitniot, technically, okay, to explain this. Now, I'm not getting into trouble here. So I said, anything is chametz if it's made from 5 grains: wheat, barley, oat, rye, and spelt, right? So are there other grains? What are other grains? Huh? Corn. Corn's a grain. And there's another major staple, rice. What about corn and rice?
And apparently green beans.
Okay, wait. Let's just do with the grains first. I just want to get to the grains first, because that's a more reasonable conversation to have. What about these grains? So the rabbis said 5 grains, right? The rabbis in the Mishnah. So that's 1,800 years ago. That's the first collection of Jewish law. Pretty authoritative, second only to Torah in how authoritative it is. Rabbis in the Torah and the Mishnah said, these are the 5 grains that we are not allowed to have as Comets during Passover, but from which we make matzah. Okay? So, smart rabbis later said, what about rice and corn? So, Sephardic rabbis said, well, the rabbis in the Mishnah did not say rice and corn, so let's eat rice and corn. The Ashkenazi rabbis at the time said, no, they were talking about the 5 most common grains. The Ashkenazi rabbis meant all grains, no matter whether they knew about those grain products or not. So then you might ask, what about quinoa? Well, quinoa is not a grain, it's a grass. It's different. So everybody eats quinoa, theoretically. Those who are opposed to eating rice and corn will eat quinoa on Passover because they know it's not a grain, it's a grass. Okay? Now, for me, the simple person, you'd look at a stalk of wheat and you look at a quinoa plant, it looks kind of similar, but I'm not a botanist. It's different, and that's all that counts. It's not a grain. It's not from the family of grain. But rice and corn is in the family of grain. Now, rice, if you take a look at a rice paddy, that looks like grass to me. But again, I'm not the expert. Rice and corn is grain, and therefore for Ashkenazi will never be allowed to be eaten on Passover. Sephardim say, let's read this literally, and we also want to have people save money, and we want to make Passover livable for as many people as possible. Now, they didn't know about people who had gluten allergies. Okay, if you have a gluten allergy, now you might be able to eat oat, or you might be able to eat spelt, but you definitely can't eat wheat. So there's a problem if you're only eating matzah. If you have a gluten allergy, what are you going to do? If you could eat rice, wow, that would be great. So why not be a Sephardi on Passover? The Ashkenazim even recognize, let's say it's a mixed marriage. Ashkenazi marrying a Sephardi, okay? And the Sephardi is the woman who's doing all the cooking. Again, I'm not being sexist. Just saying back in the Middle Ages, it would be the woman who was doing the cooking. Sephardi woman cooking for her Ashkenazi husband. The Ashkenazi husband doesn't have to tell the Sephardi wife, don't make your rice dish during Passover. He might not choose to eat it, but her making it doesn't make his plate unkosher for Passover, doesn't make the food that she cooks in the same pot that she cooked the rice in unkosher for Passover. An Ashkenazi goes to a kosher for Passover Sephardi home, and they serve rice for dinner, and it's put on your plate. The Ashkenazi doesn't have to go, oh no, what am I going to do? You can just not eat the rice. The Ashkenazim recognize that rice is okay for the Sephardim, and it doesn't invalidate or trafe your kosher for Passover stuff. They just say, we don't eat it, because we think that it's still one of the grains, and it's not kosher for Passover, okay? Now, so that's what they do about rice and corn. The other aspect of this is, and this gets to the crazy ridiculous, and it's just no other nice adjective to describe this. The rabbi said, the question was, what about beans? Okay, chickpeas, soybeans, so the lentils. Okay, so chickpeas and lentils would be the common Middle Eastern beans that people would be eating. So the rabbi said, thanks to the Ashkenazi rabbis again, when you cook the beans, it looks like grains when you cook them, And because it looks like it when you cook it, people will get mixed up, and you shouldn't eat it then. So we shouldn't eat the beans on Passover. Also, when you buy it in the shuk, you're buying loose. Uh, the way where you buy your flour could be the place where you buy the beans, and the shopkeeper could be putting his scoop into the flour and then not cleaning it properly, and then putting it into the beans, and then you'd have some flour mixed in with your beans, and then you got Comets that way too. So for those two reasons, when you buy it in the shuk, it could have grains in them. And when you cook them, it looks like cooked grains. Ashkenazim say, no, we don't eat beans on Passover. Sephardim say, this is almost literally these words, you ridiculous Ashkenazi rabbis, we don't follow your thinking when it comes to beans. We eat beans on Passover. So literally, the sources of the rabbis who are writing these decisions back in the Middle Ages, you have an Ashkenazi rabbi reinforcing the bean, anti-bean rule, and the Sephardi rabbi doing the pro-bean rule, and saying, our people know how to cook. They know the difference between cooked beans and cooked grains, and our people know how to sift products as well, and they can just sift through the beans to make sure there's no grain products mixed in. So that's what Sephardim do. Yes? So they still don't eat mustard. So mustard is from a seed. Right. So why isn't mustard kosher for Passover? Because the seed, okay.
Well, I get why it's an Ashkenazi.
Yeah, right. The seed, can you buy kosher for Passover real mustard? So I don't know. So here's, okay. That the problem that the Ashkenazim do is that not only do they say corn and rice is no good, and these beans are no good, they also then carry it the next step. Anything that looks like these things, we don't allow on Passover either. So vanilla beans. So can you have vanilla on Passover? So there's imitation vanilla extract that's kosher for Passover, but can you have real vanilla extract? So there is this category. What about the byproduct of kitniot? So this category of rice, corn, and beans is known as kitniot. What about the byproduct of kitniot? Can that be kosher for Passover? Some people say the byproduct is okay, but not the real thing is okay. What does a byproduct mean? Honey. Honey is a byproduct of bees. Bees are not kosher. You can't eat a bee because a bee is an insect. It's a swarming thing. Never can you eat a bee, but you can eat honey. Why can you eat honey? A bee made it. So that's the category of a byproduct of something. So if you can eat honey, and that's kosher, why can't you eat a byproduct of a bean? And that could be kosher. So like tofu. So that's why, or what about corn oil? Or what about soybean oil? That's byproduct. What about peanut butter? So peanuts, by the way, are not nuts. Technically, they're in this category of a legume. I only learn about these things because, the halachic element of it. So a peanut is a bush. The part of the branch on which the peanut grows, when the peanut plant is growing, it grows out of the ground and then it goes back into the ground. And the peanut grows actually underground. And that is in a shell. Obviously, we all know what peanuts look like in their shell. It looks like a bean. So rabbi said, no, not kosher. The Ashkenazi rabbis say peanuts are not kosher at Passover. Sephardi rabbis would say peanuts would be okay. But what about the byproduct of peanuts? Peanut butter or peanut oil. Some people would say that it's okay, and some people say it's not okay. It depends. But you might be able to buy kosher or Passover peanut oil. It depends who's the authoritative rabbi that's doing that. And peanut butter, you might be able to buy all natural, 100% no additive peanut butter. You can buy that before Passover and use it during Passover because there wouldn't be any Comets in the 100% natural peanut butter. So so now rabbis today are asking the question because there are a lot of people that now have common food allergies or food conditions like Crohn's, celiac. Celiac is, you can't eat gluten. So that's you get actually physically sick by eating it. And then there's for health reasons, people don't want to eat gluten either. And then whatever other allergies that people have, Passover, these 8 days of Passover make it very difficult to eat on Passover. It would be a lot more convenient if people could eat kitniot. So because of the way I explained the whole kitniot process, that it's a fence on top of a fence, as Sharon had put it before, about other aspects of kosher for Passover, that's what it is with the kitniot. It looks like a grain, and when you cook it, it looks like cooked grain products. So to be safe, rabbis say don't eat it. But all of that is just to be safe, because they even recognize, like I said, you go into a Sephardi home and they're cooking with kitniot, you can still eat in that home, just don't eat the product. Wait a second, if it's chametz, it's chametz, right? What microscopic trace of chametz makes it not kosher or Passover? Why make that allowance for beans? Either it's chametz or it's not chametz. Don't give me this half a category. Well, if you go into a Sephardi home, it's okay. So because of that, either it's chametz or it's not. And they're doing the extra things. Some rabbis today and the conservative movement is saying we should eat kitniot. Don't need to maintain this custom of not eating kitniot anymore. I've tried to convince my wife to buy kitniot, to serve rice on Passover, just because you can. So she won't do it. She won't do it. And so it's possible. My father-in-law won't eat it. My father, who's a conservative rabbi, would eat the kitniot. My father-in-law will not do it. But you go to any of the kosher, I know 7 Mile Market has a whole kitniot section. So kosher for Passover kitniot stuff. And when you buy stuff in Israel, you have to be very careful when you're buying kosher. All the supermarkets, they're kosher for Passover, but you have to look on the back and you have to know Hebrew, because they're not going to have it in English on the label. For those who eat kitniot, this is kosher for Passover. So it says ochle kitniot, kosher for Passover, or just plain kosher for Passover, which means there's no kitniot in it. So you have to be careful. So like a lot of ice cream bars, I know this because I've been in Israel for Passover before. So the ice cream bars will have kosher for Passover for those who eat kitniot. I don't know why. What's in the ice cream? Maybe it's the vanilla. I don't know, but I'm readily eating it. It says kosher for Passover. I'm there. I'm eating it. So I would eat kitniot in Israel because I can get it. I would eat it here, but my wife says, no, we're not bringing it into the house. But imagine, so what we do for karpas, you dip the parsley in the salt water, right? So the Haggadah we use, which we've been using for close to 20 years now, is what's published by the Hartman Institute, which suggests making the Seder more palatable in that how long it's taking, is that for karpas, eat your appetizers at that time. Anything that you dip. So if you eat a gefilte fish with horseradish, you're dipping the gefilte fish in the horseradish, the chopped liver, eat all the dips during that time. So wouldn't it be nice to have hummus and tahina for tahina sesame seeds? I guess sesame seeds are okay, but hummus is made from chickpeas. So chickpeas are kitniot. You can't eat that. But wouldn't it be nice to have kosher for Passover hummus? That'd be really nice. Dipping matzah in it. Not quite the same as pita in it, but that would be kind of nice. Or your vegetables in the hummus would be really nice. So I'm all for eating kitniot, but it has to have the kosher for Passover symbol on it. That's all. Now, what about tofu? So I don't know how tofu is made. It's soybeans. So it's that's kitniot. Now, I don't know if you can get kosher for Passover tofu.
Depends on how much you're willing to spend.
I don't know. Does it have a P on it? I don't know.
I've been buying kitniot a couple of years, and I think 7 Mile Market has a lot of products that are really out of my price range.
Yes.
Like,
but
so I make hummus, I buy a can of kosher lepesa, kitni, or
chickpeas,
but
right?
I won't buy hummus
Okay,
because
okay,
it's $10.
yeah, because right, I understand that they jack up the prices. I understand that, but tofu is processed, so I don't know the process of the soy becoming tofu. So I don't know enough about it to know whether hummus is in that process or not. So I don't know if 100% tofu means that there's no hummus in it. You'd have to look online and find out. If in the processing of tofu there's no hummus in it, then I would say, for people who are looking for their protein, people with an egg allergy, you got a problem on Passover, right? If you're allergic to eggs, right? So where are you getting your protein from? And what if you're a vegetarian who's allergic to eggs? You got a problem, right? Okay, and so because you can't get your protein from fish, you can't do animal protein if you're vegetarian. So where are you getting your protein from? Proteins are wheat and bean, a grain and bean together make a whole protein. So, but you're out on the bean if you're an Ashkenazi. So where are you getting your whole protein for a whole week? A couple of days without a whole protein, you can go without, I guess, and still be healthy. But a whole week without a whole protein, I'm not sure that that's really healthy to do. So what are you going to do if you're vegetarian and allergic to eggs about your getting your protein for Passover? You can cheese, okay, right? But what if you're vegan? I guess it's a vegan. If you're a vegan, then you got a problem. You can get your protein if you're vegetarian from dairy. But there are people who are allergic to dairy also, right? Lactose intolerant people, and if you have an allergy to that. So it's a problem for Passover. So kitniot then can alleviate some of those issues.
So what about the thing that your health comes first?
Health comes first. Health comes first, except during Passover. Right. No, so health comes first, but you have an out. You have an out with the kitniot. You can do it with the kitniot. You can. So that'd be fine. Now, so vegetarianism is, it's not just for health reasons. There's an ethics. There's ethics behind it, and you can't deny the ethics behind being a vegetarian. Vegan, that's a harder argument to make, to say that it's more ethical to be vegan than it is to be vegetarian in terms of eating cheese or dairy products or eggs, right? So, I mean, you can make that argument that you don't want to eat animal products, animal byproducts. Okay, again, but so I'm not vegetarian, I'm not vegan. So, but I can understand people who are, and I'm all for it. And in the Garden of Eden and before Noah, we were all vegetarian. That's the tradition, that we're all vegetarian. And Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook said, when we go to the Garden of Eden, we'll be vegetarian again. So this is just a compromise that God made, so to help not have war. That we can vent our violence on killing animals if that helps us not kill other people. That's the idea behind the compromise to eat meat. So I get it, why people are vegetarian and vegan, but so if you are, that makes it doubly problematic for you for what you're going to eat for Passover. Judy.
So you're saying if I buy rice before Passover?
Not minute rice, no processed rice, bags of rice, 100% rice, nothing else mixed in, absolutely. It doesn't need a kosher for Passover symbol on it. You should just sift it, just to make sure there are no beans in it. Not three, I don't know, just probably anything American made, 100% natural, you'll be 100% guaranteed that there's nothing else mixed in there, no comets mixed in there. So corn on the cob, fresh corn on the cob you could get, not in a can. Okay, and frozen. I guess you could do the frozen corn before Passover, but not during Passover. So you can do that. Frozen corn you can do, not cans, unless it has a kosher or Passover symbol on it, which you're not going to find here. And fresh corn on the cob. So, I think the supermarkets sell them in the produce section already cut and cleaned. I'm not so sure. That it depends how they're cleaning it and cutting it. So better if this were corn season, if Passover was in August, oh boy, just go to a farmer market stand and get all the corn that you want. That would be great. But no, so yes, frozen corn you can buy. You can buy bags of frozen corn. That would be fine.
So strange.
Why? What's strange about it?
Well, I mean, because,
Oh, because you're not used to eating it. Right. So this just opens up, if you're just doing it for the novelty of it, I'm not so sure it's worth changing your custom for that purpose. If there's a health benefit behind it, or if you're vegetarian or vegan, I can understand this opens up your menu, your diet options. There's more of a reason for it. If you're just doing it just because, get those Ashkenazi rabbis from 700 years ago who created this custom and whatever adjective you want to say to curse them, then I'm not sure that's a reason to give up your custom. But if it's available in the market, why not? Why not? But if you're going to play what?
Wait.
It's 1 week. But Gilda, but the point is, why buy, the system has to make sense. The system has to provide a sense of spirituality. And if by the system you are then questioning and you're rolling your eyes and you're saying it's ridiculous, then that questions the whole spirituality of the system. And if this makes the system more spiritual and makes it more of a reason to buy into the whole kosher for Passover, then I say do it. Okay, but Gilda, like your mother, okay, some people are used to doing it this way. It's not a tircha, as we would say in Hebrew or Yiddish. It's not a bother, so it's not a bother. But again, for people who have the allergies or the people who are vegan, it's an issue. That week that's real suffering, and this is an out for them. Or if you're married to a Sephardi or you have Sephardi cousins, now you don't have to be impolite and just push the rice to the side. You can eat it with gusto. But she won't make it. Right. So my wife won't make it. My wife, but she's part Dutch. And the Dutch ate rice on Passover. They're part Sephardi. But no. So her grandfather, her Ashkenazi Polish grandmother cooked rice for her Dutch husband. But my wife, whose grandparents I'm talking about, she won't make the rice. So anyway. I'm not going to repeat that question here for this. Any other questions or comments about the kosher laws? All right, so I hope everybody has a happy and a kosher Passover.
you got a class in 2 weeks?
Right, so